Steve, is TV here tonight, or do you know?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they were back there a minute ago.
Oh, they're ready.
Look at that.
Okay, we're good. If I can have your attention, we'll call the April Rolla City Planning and Zoning to order. First item is to approve the minutes from last month. We had one small addition, which we made. Any other additions, corrections, or additions? Deletions? If not, I'll approve those as printed and distributed. Next item is report on recent city council actions. Tom?
So at the last meeting, you had the DCM Holdings minor subdivision that was on Bishop and 7th and 8th, something like that. Anyway, 6th and 7th. So the city council had their first reading on that, but we have not had the second reading on the ordinance to approve that. It came to light that there's an easement that will need to be vacated as well. And we didn't know about it before this case or whatever, so we're taking care of that at the same time. And so that has the second reading of that has not happened quite yet. And the other item was that major thoroughfare plan resolution. The city council did approve the amendment to the thoroughfare plan by ordinance as well, and that they did both readings of that the same night on the March 15th.
Okay, any questions for Tom regarding city council actions? Okay, next item is old business. We have none. We have one public hearing. It's a rezoning for property located at 512 East 18th Street from M2 heavy manufacturing to C3 highway commercial. Tom?
All right, this is the property is highlighted on the air photo. This is on 18th Street. You might recognize it's kind of basically where 18th Street crosses the railroad tracks and near where Bardsley and Old St. James and Sharp Road and also where it becomes Walnut Street. It's a lot of stuff happens kind of in that area. But you may not have noticed this building before. There's a little driveway south of the road that kind of serves the ambulance place as well as the railroad, and also serves this building that's kind of back behind these other buildings. The property is currently zoned M2, which is the heavy manufacturing zoning district, and should just notice on the map a lot of the other surrounding areas are also zoned M2. But also notice that there are some areas that are zoned C3, which is the highway commercial zoning district, and that is what is being requested, including most notably the property adjacent to it, which is the ambulance building. Also notable is next to this industrial area is the residential area, is somewhat off this map, and basically to the west, south, and eastish, it's all kind of it's actually residential. This kind of has a little bit of history back many years ago when all this was first built as an industrial type area. 18th Street didn't cross the railroad track, so this is kind of is next to the railroad track and near I-44 and kind of disconnected from the rest of the city at one time, and so it was a industrial type area. Since then, the latest comprehensive plan actually recommends that this area transition from industrial type uses more toward commercial type uses, because now it's a little bit more visible. This is the street view to remind you what the building looks like. As I said, this is looking south from 18th Street. The property is next to the railroad tracks and behind the ambulance barn. Also, just of note, you can kind of see it a little bit better on this picture, less well if you drive out there today, but the property is kind of paved. There's at one point it was paved, and there's been a lot of filling in of potholes and whatnot with the gravel, and since then there's some areas where there's more gravel than pavement, but at one point it was paved. Just to kind of summarize, the commercial use would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, because it does recommend that area become more commercial. There is some C3 zoning in the area. And if leaving it as industrial actually may be a little bit not very compatible with the neighborhood now that things are kind of changing. And if somebody were to come in and do some of the uses that the M2 district actually allows, may not be very compatible with the area. Right now it's mostly kind of storage buildings and service yards and repair and things like that. Those are kind of mild type uses, and most of those are actually allowed in the C3 district. But the M2 district allows for factories and smoke and smells and all that sort of stuff as well, if somebody were to come in here and do that. This property is part of a larger area, which may actually be recommended to be rezoned in the future. You may have heard we've been working on this neighborhood plan for this area, and one of the things that's actually recommended in that neighborhood plan is to rezone this area from industrial to commercial zoning. That plan has not been adopted yet, so it's not something we're actively working on, but it may be something that actually comes back before you. There is some alternatives. Could accept that the request meets the criteria for approval of rezoning, and so recommend the City Council approve the request. We can accept that it meets the criteria, however, recommend approval of C2, which is general retail, or C1, neighborhood commercial. The C2 district, just so you know, would allow for the proposed use, and I guess I probably should have mentioned that. The applicant is proposing it's an indoor batting cage type facility. Like I said, that's allowed in the C2 or C3 uses, but not allowed in the industrial uses, which is why they're here. We can find that the request is not appropriate, and so recommend the City Council deny the request, or if you need more information, you can table it to a certain date. Do you have any questions for me before we move to the public hearing?
Tom, the entrance, is that a public street?
It's hard to say. It's probably not a public street, even though it kind of shows it similar to the way a right-of-way shows up on our GIS and mapping. It's the Public Works weren't able to come to a definitive answer for me, but it may be and most likely is part of railroad property, since it's there's a drive there serving the signal. But we're quite sure it's not part of this property. We're quite sure it's not part of the ambulance property. But we're not sure if the railroad owns it, and we're pretty sure it's not public right-of-way.
Would that hinder? I'm assuming since it's always been used, they could force the issue, but if it's a railroad, would that be a big issue?
I mean, it would be between the railroad and them. I think it would be, since this property doesn't have any other way to get to it, it would be something that would, they'd probably be able to, the railroad probably would not be able to stop them from using it without going through a court proceeding.
Okay.
Could you not get egress off of Walnut Street?
Go back to the air photo. The property doesn't quite have frontage on Walnut Street. They had to go
okay.
through a different property.
So Tom, is the property itself outside of the neighborhood plan area, or is it part of that Berwan-Schumann neighborhood area?
It is part of it.
It is part, okay.
The other question I've got is the egress and getting out of there. Right next to a railroad track, heavy traffic, is that a concern? Where you'd block or have an issue trying to get on and off with the railroad track if you were coming that way? You could block traffic where it would be on a railroad track. Is that possible? Is that a concern? I guess it's a concern, I don't know.
I would say it's probably not a concern. I didn't receive anything to that effect from our Public Works fellas. This driveway is also directly across the street from Sharp Road, which would have a lot more traffic than this driveway. And it's existing, so the level of traffic from industrial use versus it changing over to a commercial use, it'd be hard to say that it's different. So add all that together,
I could just see several vehicles coming from the south to the north, trying to make a left-hand turn there with heavy traffic would be a concern. I don't know what to do about it, and it's probably not something we would deal with here. It's just something somebody ought to think about.
Yeah. That whole area is a bit of a mess at times.
Yeah, there's a lot of traffic and a lot of roads that intersect and come in weird angles. I'm like Russ, I think it's a potential problem, but I
Since you
guess-
got the railroad there, it's a concern.
Any other questions for Tom? If not, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Please try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Please try not to repeat what anybody else has said. It's not what you are different. So I'll officially open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward. Can't see around that post, but don't see anybody jumping up, so we've had last 3 public hearings, we hadn't had anybody speak, so seeing none, I'll officially close the public hearing. Any other discussion or comments?
I guess, hey, Tom, I don't really have any problem with the C3, but I'm just wondering if at this juncture with the neighborhood plan in progress, if C2 might not be a better fit for this area at this particular moment. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's sort of why I threw out there as a possibility of C2. C3 does allow for a lot of less neighborly things, but it would fit in with a lot of what's already there currently. Like, for example, it's next to the crane place, and there's some car repair and things like that. I mean, those are allowed in the C3 district, but not allowed in the C2 district. So the applicant is here. If you'd like to ask them if they would be comfortable with the
It's
C2.
still a step down from M2. I mean, a big
Is-
step down from 2, so
Yeah,
you're gaining that much, so.
yeah.
And you say the other properties that are C3, they would not be allowed in a C2 zoning anyway, right? Like the ambulance?
I'm not sure about the ambulance barn, but for sure there's some car repair places and
And
the
crane.
storage yards and that sort of stuff.
Right,
It-
place would- okay.
Monument company across the street, so.
Yeah. Just talking about the whole plan, we were thinking maybe that whole area could go C2, but if we have businesses on it that can't, then that'll keep us from doing that
Corner
anyway.
across from that's the old maintenance building for the Rolla. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we send it to the city council with our approval.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Any other questions before we vote? Roll call vote, please.
Bowie,
Yes.
Eberly,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Stephen Shields,
Yes.
Kreider.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. I messed up. I thought we had 2 public hearings, but the next item is under new business, so we won't have a public hearing. It's a Drury Development Edition, final plat for minor subdivision to subdivide property located at 204, 2004, and 2006 North Bishop into 2 commercial lots. Tom?
Okay, you'll notice on the you'll notice on the agenda that the case number for this is subdivision 20-01. That's not a typo. We actually started discussing with this group last year, and they made application last year, but it was put on hold because so they could come to some final decisions on what they were going to do. So the property is located at the northeast corner of Highway 63 and I-44. You may more famously recognize as the site of where the Steak and Shake and the Pear Tree Inn are located at. The rest of the property is undeveloped, except for there is some cell towers on it and a billboard. The property is zoned a bit strangely. Part of the property is zoned C2, general retail. Part of the property is zoned M2, which is the heavy manufacturing. This is a looked back as far as I can look at it, but it's a relic from a long time ago when this area was zoned. Basically, they zoned an amount of frontage along the highway as retail and the rest for industrial type uses. They, depending on what happens with redevelopment and things like that, there's a high likelihood that they'll be back at some point to rezone the property to so they're at least the same zoning district. The request is to subdivide the property into 2 lots. The subdivision would keep the restaurant site on one lot and keep the hotel site on another lot. And so you can kind of see the dashed line on there where the zoning is. As I said, if things come in to redevelop, they'll probably need to rezone. And the M2 district, as we find out with the last case, it actually doesn't allow for a lot of commercial type uses that one might expect there. So they may have to come back to rezone it, depending on what happens. Just to summarize, this plat will create 2 commercial lots where there was just one. It will allow for the existing buildings to be sold on separate lots. They may or may not be redeveloped with something else if they sell it off. Other than that, it appears to be in compliance with all the requirements. Should point out, since it does look a little bit different than most plats, this is commercial. The commercial ones are not required to have frontage on a street. They can actually be served by an easement. So that's what they're proposing in this case. It does have frontage on I-44, but not sure that would count. But the back lot is served through an easement through the front lot. Just, we have some alternatives. We can find that it meets requirements, recommend approval to the City Council. We can find that it does not meet requirements, state why it does not, so recommend denial. Or we can find that the plat could meet requirements with some conditions, and so recommend approval with those conditions. Or if we need more information, table it to a certain date. Do you have any questions for me?
Hey, Tom, is it okay to have a lot that has 2 different zoning on it?
Is it okay? I mean, that can happen. It can happen. Say if it weren't going through these buildings, say if it made a little bit more sense, the hotel was zoned commercial and the back was zoned something else. I mean, it could happen if they had all that commercial activity on the same property and needed different zonings for the different activity. In this case, it goes through the buildings and doesn't match lot lines. That's why I say I think they're probably going to have to come back with some rezoning.
Because that seems very odd. It doesn't fit in my brain very well.
Especially where it goes through the building.
Yeah.
Tom, how do we assure access to the back lot?
What was the
The
question?
street, how do we get,
They're proposing a private access easement. Going back to the air photo. Right now, there's already a drive going back that way, so that's kind of the primary way they get back there. But there will be a access easement over that. They're going to record covenants and whatnot for maintenance agreements and things like that.
would that be an easement, or do they deed that to the back lot
It'd be an easement.
easement?
Is there not actually 2 easements, one on the north, one on the south?
The south driveway may be going away if the
Oh, okay.
if the property is redeveloped. MoDOT would prefer it go away anyway since it's very close to the intersection.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but it's used a lot, especially going to the motel.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
The surveyor is here if you have any questions for them.
And I think the people from Drury are here also, so. You have any questions? So we're being asked to approve a minor subdivision, that's. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we send this to city council with our approval.
Ms. Shields, do we have a second?
Second.
Everly? Any other final discussion before we vote? Roll call vote, please.
Kreider,
Yes.
Stephen Shields.
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Eberly,
Yes.
Bowie.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay. It'll be sent to city council for the next, we have no other business. Just want to announce that the annual election of officers, as required by state statutes and Rolla ordinances, will be in May. Hopefully, we'll have a council representative appointed by then. Hopefully, we have the same one. Jody's done a super job, so we don't want to lose her, but, so anybody wants to get their campaign signs ready and their whatever, you're welcome. Anything else from Tom, from staff? Anything else to report?
I did email y'all a link to that Schumann-Berwan neighborhood plan on the city's website. Just want to remind you, I believe at this point we'll be bringing it for a first meeting to the next meeting that you have. And so I would just ask that maybe at some point you get a chance to flip through it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I did receive a few comments up to this point, so I'll have it revised before the next meeting, but I don't have it revised with those comments now.
Yeah, I think everybody received it, so. Anything, citizens' comments? Anybody from the audience wish to make a comment, or? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you. Have fun.
Bill, you two-
Nor are you.